Section 3. Energy as well as information! But are the mind and consciousness nothing but the outcome of digital algorithmic processing of abstract symbols in the brain? And if there is something more than this, what is it? Modern physicists have suggested that ultimately the universe can be reduced to energy and information. Let me therefore suggest that the other force in the brain, in addition to information, is energy in some form, and that it is these energy forces in our brain that can account for our subjective experiences in the form of qualia, consciousness, and feelings. What form, then, does the energy in the brain take? In answer to this question, let me further suggest that this brain energy can be described as affect, the subjective part of emotion. Emotion, in the extended and elaborate sense, as described by Jaak Panksepp and other modern emotion theorists. Emotions as a basis for mental states would be based on analog rather than digital processes. Daniel Siegel describes these energy flows in the brain as follows, quote, "The human mind emerges from patterns in the flow of energy and information within the brain and between brains," end quote. These patterns in the flow of energy and information, Siegel says, quote, "can be described as emanating from the activity of neurons in the brain," end quote. Siegel doesn't talk much about this, but there's also the chemical glandular brain, where flows of neurotransmitters deeply affect mind and consciousness. As above, the flows of energy that Siegel is describing may refer to emotional analog states in the brain, which tend to be neglected by cognitive theorists in favor of computational information processing. Siegel is very keen to emphasize that these energy flows, which he claims create our mental processes, are not figments of the New Age imagination, but based on the findings of modern neuroscience. He says, quote, "These assessments of energy flow are not popularized, unscientific views of the flow of some mysterious energy through the universe. Neuroscience studies the way in which the brain functions through the energy-consuming activation of neurons. The degree and localization of this arousal and activation within the brain, this flow of energy, directly creates our mental processes," end quote. We can now revisit my version of the Mary thought experiment, though this time looking at it from this theoretical perspective. The pre-experienced Mary would have all the digital propositional information that there is about how a severe electric shock affects the human nervous system. But until she is wired up and the power is turned on, she wouldn't have had the experience of what such a shock feels like in analog energetic terms. Consequently, she would learn something new from actually experiencing the shock. But Dennett has actually denied the reality of pain, quote, "If you can make yourself study your pains, even quite intense pains, you will find, as it were, no room left to mind them. They stop hurting. However, studying a pain, for example, a headache, gets boring pretty fast, and as soon as you stop studying them, they come back and hurt, which, oddly enough, is sometimes less boring than being bored by them, and so, to some degree, preferable." End quote. Some might argue that rejecting the idea that in addition to information processing, we also have analog emotion energetic experiences might simply reduce us to the status of zombies. But it appears that Dennett would not have a problem with this outcome. He says, regarding the possibility of the existence of philosophical zombies, that, quote, "they're not just possible, they're actual. We're all zombies. Nobody is conscious. I can't prove that no such sort of consciousness exists. I also can't prove that gremlins don't exist. The best thing I can do is show that there is no respectable motivation for believing in it." End quote.